the respiratory system. In this video, scientists will be able to comprehend the function of the respiratory system by learning about the organs and functions of the respiratory system. Before we get into this system, it's important to review. Remember that cells need energy in order to survive. Cells make energy through a process called cellular respiration. You might remember that the mitochondria is the organelle responsible for creating energy. Now, mitochondria need oxygen and sugar to create that energy. As mitochondria create energy, they use oxygen and sugar to produce energy that cells can use, and CO2, which is a waste product. Every single one of your trillions of cells needs oxygen and needs to get rid of CO2. Thankfully, your body has the respiratory system. The function of the respiratory system is to bring oxygen into the body and get rid of carbon dioxide. That makes sense. If your cells need oxygen, well then your body needs to bring oxygen from outside the body into the body. And if your cells need to get rid of CO2, then you need a system that can release CO2 back into the environment. And that's the job of your respiratory system. Now, in order to exchange oxygen and CO2, your body has several organs in the respiratory system. In order, from the outside down to your lungs, is the nose, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, lungs, and diaphragm. Your nose, this thing, actually has a particular function, which is to moisten and clean the inhaled air. Air from the environment goes through your nose and gets filtered slightly before it makes its way down to your lungs. From your nose, air passes through a section in your throat called the pharynx. Your pharynx has an important function. Maybe you've noticed that you can't swallow and breathe at the same time. That's because your pharynx separates food and air. The pharynx sends air down your trachea, and it sends food down your esophagus. Nobody wants a bit of hamburger stuck in their lungs. Once air makes it past the pharynx, it travels through this tube in the front of your throat called the trachea. The trachea is simply that, is a tube that connects your nose to your lungs. Interestingly, it is surrounded by thick bands of cartilage that keeps that tube open. Thank goodness. If there wasn't cartilage going around our trachea, well then that tube would collapse and you wouldn't be able to breathe. Once the air makes it down the trachea, it splits in a section called the bronchi. The bronchi takes air from the trachea and splits it to the left and the right lung. Now, the lungs are the most important organ of the respiratory system. The lungs are the organ responsible for exchanging gases. What do I mean by that? That means that oxygen from the environment goes into your lungs and into your body. And CO2, carbon dioxide, from your body gets into your lungs and is removed from your body. So in your lungs, oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out. The final organ is the diaphragm, which is actually a muscle. The diaphragm sits below your lungs, and as it contracts, as it pulls, it creates a vacuum that sucks air into your lungs. So the diaphragm is below your lungs, it contracts as a muscle, and that is what pulls air into your lungs. As the diaphragm relaxes, the air is sort of squeezed out of your lungs. Finally, within your lungs, there are special structures called alveoli. And you don't really need to worry about alveoli until you get to high school. But you should know that within your lungs are these tiny sacs of air. Those are the alveoli. At the alveoli, gases are exchanged. The air that comes into your lungs travels down to these tiny sacs, and oxygen from the air is pulled into the blood, and CO2 that was created by your cells and put into your blood, CO2 leaves your body and goes into the alveoli. So here's your key ideas. The main function of the respiratory system is to exchange gases, and the lungs are the main organ of the respiratory system.